the the fun part is doing the engineering at the same time as the
Oh,
conversation.
yeah, exactly. Well, you get to a point to where all you need to do is show up. You'll have a whole team for that.
Yeah. Well, I have a team for it. I just didn't book them today.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Progress, right? That's good.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. We've been doing this for years.
Nice. Very nice.
Um, okay. Hi, this is Rob Sanchez, and I'm here with Kingsley. And Kingsley, I'd love to have you just give a little bit about your background and just tell us where you're at and what you're working on.
Yeah, sure. Rob, appreciate you having me. It's a pleasure being here and being a guest on your show here. As Rob said, my name's Kingsley Umeh. Um, I've got an extensive background in corporate finance. I've been in corporate finance for about 15 years. I've worked on a variety of deals, mergers and acquisition, margin analysis with financial statements, managed capital structure with corporations, and decided to go out and we started our own financing company, commercial financing company specializing in companies that need to raise debt through um, through loans, I guess, for their own capital structure. And so, we've got a variety of those things that we do help with business owners, small business owners, medium-sized business owners, large businesses that really need some of those larger type, in the hundreds of service those clients as well. So very enjoyable, love it, and happy to be here.
Excellent. So we've been talking over the last couple days, just getting to know each other, and mainly like looking at brokering loans, setting up relationships with clients, just talking through some of that. Um, when you got started in this industry, what was that like for you? It's a bit of a departure from what you were doing before, and I
Yeah,
know that you probably had some changes going on when that was happening.
yeah. So and I appreciate the question. When you're in a corporate environment, the structure is there, right? I mean, you have a CFO, you have other directors that you're working with. I was a director of finance myself. There is an infrastructure there that helps, right? There are the banking relationships that are already there with the treasury team within a corporate structure, and you just rely on those existing relationships, both internally and externally. You come with the company that you're working for, which is the brand equity on its own, and then you structure those deals from that standpoint, right? When you go out and you set up a business, you are doing all of that. You are the CEO, you're the CFO, you're the treasury manager, you're the marketing manager, you're the sales
Yeah,
director, you're all of those
you
things in one.
plunge the toilets. It's yeah.
Yes, yeah. So you know
Yeah.
how it is, and so what it really is you're kind of putting planting seeds, and you're going out there. You're going to your local chambers. You're shaking hands. There's a lot of cold calling, if you will, for businesses for specific targets based on your model, your business model, your strategy within and what we were trying to do. Um, and just the old adage, meet and greet, right? Go shake
Yep.
hands and try to foster and develop those type of relationships. And so that's kind of how it is. It's challenging, but because again, there's no brand recognition, there's no name recognition, and so you just have to go out and work those, and eventually they start coming through.
Yeah. Now you do multiple different kinds of loans.
Correct.
So I'm wondering if you can talk us through a little bit about what you're working in right now,
Sure.
and then has that changed at all?
Sure. So right now, what's really hot is commercial real estate. The whole real estate environment is really taking off. We're seeing a little bit of a slowdown now because the federal government kind of raised rates there. I think 200 basis points over the last month or so on the residential side, or just in general. Um, but commercial real estate is kind of what we're really going on right now. There's a lot of development out there across the United States.
Yeah.
Apartments. There's a lot of fix and flips, which is considered, kind of commercial deals to what we try to do. But again, we do a variety of things, right? There's ABL, which is asset-backed lending. Basically, companies come to us and just say, "Hey, listen, we want to leverage, whatever assets we have on the balance sheet for loans,
Mhm.
medical, construction equipment, whatever the type of company that comes in." So there's a variety of things that we do. But to answer your question, commercial right now, commercial loans is really kind of what's leading the way in terms of what we're seeing.
Mhm.
Um, and we're really excited about that because I do kind of have a knack for development. I kind of feel like I'm part of some of these areas that are developing their industrial part of the city. So that's what we're
Yeah.
seeing.
Now, I've been hearing that inside of large cities, commercial isn't all that is maybe slowing down a little bit
Hmm.
with the house prices,
Yep.
but that as you get outside of the city and you start looking at more rural areas, what's happening is a boom in small office space.
Correct.
Are you seeing any trends like that in your areas that you're working?
Yeah. So I mean, again, there's a tie between what's happening in the residential and a tie what's happening in the commercial. What's happening in the residential housing is an underlying economic indicator within the overall economy. And so what's happening is that when you get outside of the city or main cities, metroplex, you see a lot of movement in development residential housing. Well, what happens is that businesses follow those individuals that are moving out there. And so that same trend that you're seeing for small retail offices are popping up in those places outside of those smaller cities. And so we're seeing a lot of those deals where investors, developers, they come out there, they want to do these type deals. They're finding tenants to come in there. Whether it's an ice cream shop or whatever it is that you're doing, chiropractic shop. Because a lot of people are just really taking advantage of the
Ice cream and
entrepreneurship bug,
chiropractor, yeah.
right? And just going in there and setting up their own deal. And so that trend is definitely here. So again, it's an indicator again with I can't remember the exact amount of individuals that have left their jobs. Um,
Yeah, but it's pretty high.
yeah, and so that all of that is all tying in together.
Yeah. Are you seeing anything on the equipment side? Is there a rise in local manufacturing or anything like that? I have a couple friends who've pivoted their businesses
Yeah,
completely and are now like small manufacturing
yeah,
sites.
yeah. Well, really in the construction space, you're
Hmm.
seeing a lot of that. Those trucks are pretty expensive. The equipment for moving dirt, in the hundreds of thousands. And so,
Yeah.
because again, going back to the economics and what's happening with the growth and a lot of these cities, those are happening a lot. And so, on the equipment standpoint, from a construction part standpoint, that is kind of leading the way. There are some manufacturing pieces where the wear and tear of the depreciation is fully done with some equipment, and we're
Hmm.
seeing some of that. Um,
Yeah.
so
But
we're
it's not like a boom yet on that
not
side.
necessarily, not right now. The boom is really in commercial real estate, commercial developers.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay. And as far as the commercial side, is there a type of construction that you're seeing? We talked a little bit about the fix and flip, and I
yep,
think that's been romanticized quite a bit.
yep.
Um, and not everything you see on HGTV is the
Right.
reality on the ground. Um, Especially, I think some of the stars are currently under investigation for some
Yep.
stuff on some of their shows. Yeah. But what exactly is like happening inside of that space? Is there a trend in a certain type of
Yeah,
real estate?
we're working with a couple of clients now that are really developing, apartment complexes.
Yeah,
Right. Again, it's a reflection of what's happening within the overall economy, where there's a housing shortage.
yeah.
And so we're seeing a lot of developments in multifamily units, um, repurposing of old buildings for multi-purpose units, multifamily units. So it's really kind of within the commercial space, apartment complexes that investors and developers are really trying to push forward. So
Hmm.
I mean, you have other things, right? You don't really see too many deals coming in where somebody wants to build a skyscraper in the middle of a downtown area.
Right.
There are some developments that are happening. I think there's one major project going on in Atlanta right now, the next couple few years, that's going to really pop up here. Um, but what's really pushing that and leading the way is commercial property within apartment complexes.
Hmm. And what about we see a lot in the news about the Airbnb and the changes in in towns and cities and so on
Mhm.
that's happening from that. Are you seeing any loans being put towards that use?
Um, Not so much there.
Yeah.
What's happening is that there are investors who already have property that are converting it to Airbnb type, Verbo type businesses, right?
Hmm.
There are a few. There's a couple in Dallas outside of Cowboy Stadium where that's kind of gotten popular. Where there's some regular homes available for that, but for the most part, investors are just converting the current inventory that they have rather than just leasing it out. They're just
Hmm.
putting it as okay, here's a weekend type structure where you can come in for a little bit versus a long term tenant.
Yeah. We're seeing up in the area where I'm based, up in Poughkeepsie, we're seeing a lot of local municipalities basically legislating out the possibility to run those economically,
Okay,
as a, and
interesting.
in an attempt to bring housing stock back in. And
Okay,
so you're starting to see rules like no more than 90 days in a year.
okay,
And then you couple that with rules that say if you live there for longer than 30 days,
yeah.
then you have to be evicted. So,
Interesting.
like using those two together, you basically make it an untenable business.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so that's a big shift up here.
yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if that starts to correct in the housing market, and I'm not sure it will because it's almost like it's different properties and different uses.
It's hard to police.
Yeah.
My wife and I were in a meeting this weekend, and that came up in terms of some of the covenants that they're trying to establish within a particular HOA to try to limit actually those type of transactions that are happening, just
Yeah.
so they can free up what's happening within the regular housing market. So we'll see. Again, it's hard to regulate. Once a business is out there, and there's tax revenue that can be generated from that.
Yeah.
The local authorities kind of want to stay away from their stream of revenue in that area. So we'll see.
Yeah. I think one of the other things I'm seeing at least is that the rates of rent are so high.
Yeah.
We were looking at stuff that a year ago in New York City could have gotten you a one-bedroom apartment, and in Poughkeepsie, it's getting you a basement apartment.
Oh
You know,
wow.
and and so the rates I feel like have spiked so
Sure.
much that
Sure.
it makes sense to start developing in the apartment buildings and so on because
Sure.
the homes and more of the I guess like the smaller buildings
Yeah.
don't make sense economically for the
Sure.
renters.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing in Dallas. Again, there's we live in the Dallas Fort Worth area, and just just a housing shortage, and so
Yeah.
that's reflective in that the residential market. And so there's a lot of development in that space because of
Yeah.
that.
I do want to say something really quick. There's an elephant in the room in the school shooting that just happened out there. I
Yeah,
just wanted to check in. Are you guys okay? Is everything fine in your community?
yeah, everything
Um,
is fine. Like I said, we live in the Dallas Fort Worth area. It's southeast of us here. Sorry, southwest of us here. Close to San Antonio. Tragic event.
yeah.
But yeah, we're fine. Thoughts and prayers to the victims' families, and even the small children that had to witness that.
Yeah.
they'll be scarred for life, and just
I
it's one of
mean,
those unfortunate
I've got to
things.
say, as a parent, I'm terrified
Same
because my
with
son
us.
is going to school for the
Yeah,
first time next year, and
yeah. It's
yeah,
yeah, it's different times, scary. We just have to just keep
yeah,
praying and just try to put measures in to help prevent stuff like that.
yeah. Um, not to put a
No, it's important.
put in
It's an
space,
important.
but
It's
yeah,
an important topic. It's the number one topic. It's we're talking about our kids. We're talking about our children. We can
yeah,
sit up here and talk business all day long, and that's fine. But we really do this for our kids, and so
yeah.
to pass them something, and so it's important to talk about. Thanks for bringing
And I think also it's the industry we're in is about it's like home and safety and home base,
it.
right? Like
Absolutely.
that's what
Yeah.
we're building, and it's hard to
Yeah.
do that. I know that one of the things that we've been looking at is how do you make an impact on the community you're in
Hmm.
as a investor and developer. I think one of the things that's maybe missing in some of the conversations as developers grow and build, one of the reasons they're getting pushed back on ways that they're developing is
Hmm.
that maybe they're not as involved as they need to be in
Correct.
the communities.
Sure.
Um,
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean that's a good point there. There are two types of investors, right? I mean, obviously everybody wants to see a return on that capital, right? That
yeah,
cash outlay, right? I mean, that's the goal. Um, but you have a better time if you're engaged and embedded within the community, right? Because if you're developing, you do have to go through the city council. There has to be improvements to whatever it is that you're doing. There has to be residential buy-in for the people that are active in the community. I mean, somebody doesn't want a commercial building in their backyard, right? So, those type of engagements with the local city officials do help. And if you're developing something that can give back, or not necessarily tie in exactly to what you're doing, but you have some ancillary type work that can help. Maybe
yeah,
help set up a nonprofit, or you engage with somebody that is outside of what you do. Maybe you can, there's the Habitat of Humanity, which is big down here. Engage in that area, and then you can get some intangible returns for what you're doing in that aspect, and that can help with the development too. People just generally like to work with people they like. That's just how we are. We're built that way, right?
yeah,
So if somebody likes you, they may not necessarily care about your product one way or the other, but your personality can come through in terms of how you are and what you do. Yeah, that can help with your development for sure.
yeah. Are you seeing anyone be really successful in community development among clients and so on? Like, what's maybe an example you could give?
Well, I mean, you see that more on the corporate level, right?
Hmm.
Some of the bigger corporations with brand recognition that come in and try to engage from that standpoint. Not so much though the medium small type guys that are coming in, right? I mean, there's capital restraints on that. There's time restraints as well. The resources aren't there.
Yeah,
Um, it's more of um, an advisement type deal, suggestion. Not seeing a lot of it. Um, they are coming in and joining the local chambers, which helps, right? I mean, to familiarize yourself and whatever it is that you're developing within that local area, but not necessarily giving back per se. At least what I've seen,
hmm,
it's more of your larger corporations that come in there and
yeah.
try to make that community type service to the local community.
One of the questions we've had is, so we're looking at a lot of areas in upstate as investors,
Hmm.
and one of the things that my wife and I are thinking about is, well, if we can improve a school district from a 2 to a 4, you
Hmm.
can improve your, like, even or higher,
Yeah,
um, you can really increase the value of the house.
sure.
So we're wondering, like, what can be done at a school board level, what can be done, in that community as far as like bond measures and so on.
Sure.
We've been choosing a town to live in for our family, and basically, like, the first thing was, what's the school rating
Yeah,
and how receptive is the town to bond measures for improvement of the schools,
sure.
and that was like the criteria we searched with first, and then from there we went to where can we buy.
Yeah,
um, as an investor, you don't really want to buy into that, like, that top neighborhood. You want to buy like the next tier or two down and
sure.
then improve it.
Of course.
Um, so
No, that's an interesting topic. I mean, a lot of people may or may not be aware that school districts are really tied, or the revenue that is, or I should say, the investment that is done within the school district is really tied to the houses that are around there,
yeah,
right? The value of those houses, right? If that value is okay or significant, um, that property tax then is then funded to that local tax base and is funded back into the school district, or sorry, that's local school.
yeah,
And so it's really starting with the housing, right? The housing development, what's in there, how does the community upscale to actually impose a school. You brought up community. Actually working with a client that is moving from Nebraska down to Dallas to develop a school in economically challenged areas.
oh,
Uh,
interesting.
so, so his
Yeah,
business model is specific for that. He's building a school to try to, develop, different criteria within his um, curriculum to make sure that people that have access to what they really need to really educate themselves and have a little bit better, leg to stand on. And so he is directly involved in the community. He had that model that was successful where he was. And he's just bringing it down here as well. So
Yeah.
that's
That'll
a
be a
that's a good
good,
example.
interesting experiment.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. First one I've seen. So
yeah.
good to see how that come to fruition.
Yeah. We're involved in a couple of curriculum-based projects that are like entrepreneurship based and so on.
Hmm.
A little bit built around neurodiversity. So there's, a class of kids that don't do well in school. I was
Sure.
one of them. I got the grades, but I had, really
Interest.
bad experiences in school.
Gotcha.
Um, and and I got the grades as a game, not as like something my dad said that stuck with me forever. That is
Yeah.
not like a thing that he ever, I don't think he intentionally meant to say this,
Okay.
but it was like that shining light bulb for me is that you
Yeah.
don't learn in school, but you're still responsible for learning.
Ah,
And
I
and
like
s-
that.
and so like that was like, yeah, I don't learn in the school. It's just the structure doesn't work for me. I'm asleep half the
Right.
time.
Right.
Um, and so I've been, talking with a couple people who are trying to do curriculum for neurodiverse kids,
Okay.
and I think that there's some interesting things you can do on that side too,
Sure.
especially
Sure.
because that tends to drive revenue in a town as well. As if you
Yep.
can support people who are going to go on to be successful small business owners and
Sure.
entrepreneurs, that's a whole different
Skill
preparation
set.
path.
Yeah, it's totally different.
So yeah,
There's really no rule book for that.
yeah.
I
There's a
mean,
couple people who've written rule books, and now it's a
sure.
question of does that work? Um, there was an interesting point made, which was that our education system is only about 200 years old,
Hmm.
and it was designed with a specific purpose in mind,
Mhm.
and we don't know anything. Like we don't know if this is the best system. It's just
Right.
the system that we have,
Sure.
um, and we're like way behind. Like the field, the research and study is way
Yeah.
behind other fields.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting topic. I mean, you have some universities that have implemented now, entrepreneurial programs.
yeah,
Our eldest daughter is down at the University of Houston, and University of Houston has a good entrepreneurial type program, and they're trying to teach some fundamentals, but it's just one of those things. I mean, you have thousands and thousands of books about raising kids, but you know everybody's individually themselves, and so you have to figure out what works for you, right? I think it's
yeah,
the same
yeah.
way. You
Which
know,
of these 1,000 books works for my
right?
kid, and when can I read it?
Exactly.
I found the perfect book for my son, but,
Yeah.
he'll be 18 by the time I get a chance to sit
Right.
down with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, yep. Um, yeah, on that side too, I feel like if you're talking about housing and you're talking about investment in that space,
Yeah.
there's an education barrier there.
Sure.
I'm just looking at the learning curve that my wife and I have gone through as we
Sure.
start out as investors in real estate. I mean, that it's a steep curve,
Yeah.
but a lot of it is learnable.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's
Um,
it's not you're not building rockets.
yeah,
What I tell people all the time is that you buy and you sell real estate by the square footage. The square footage dictates that top selling price.
yeah,
Um, a lot of people don't realize that. They look at comps and within in a neighborhood, and I mean, it's just not. It's just anything else. It's an industry. You don't really deal with it every day, so you don't really know until you're looking to buy or sell property.
yeah,
But whatever side of the transaction you're on, it's the price per square foot that you really want to compare
yeah.
with
And
comp.
and then I think you get into specializations, right? Like
Oh, absolutely.
there are people who are great at fire rehabs, and there's
Yeah.
people that like my passion is basements. I really love looking at basements and how you can
Sure.
fix some of the issues in them.
Yeah.
And when you have that specialty, then that knowledge, and you can take stuff that's riskier. You can
Yeah.
take stuff that like other people wouldn't touch.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah,
You got that knowledge base. So
yeah. Which also gets a little bit into equipment financing and all of that stuff too,
yeah,
because then it
absolutely.
becomes like, okay, I can maximize dollars
Sure.
here, and
Yeah.
yeah,
You
one,
leverage cash,
yep,
right? That's what it's really doing. You leverage cash to generate revenue. Again,
yeah,
it's just like anything else. It's a capital expense for businesses that are looking to grow.
Yeah. One of the things that's fascinated me is it seems like this industry specifically, there's a lot you can do on the tax side. There's a lot you can do with financial planning.
Hmm.
That's the difference between someone who's good at this and someone who's great at this.
Hmm.
It's like what's the business structure? How are you maximizing your expenses? How are you
Hmm.
handling cash flow?
Hmm.
Who's in your corner on the lending perspective?
Sure.
Um, and just like what's your throughput too?
Yeah.
So it's been really interesting getting a sense of like what's actually necessary for people, I guess. And
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, in this space, it's it's a business, right? You have to understand that obviously, you're generating revenue through any normal business, right? So there are expenses that are against those revenues, and so you're profiting, and so there has to be some tax implication on that.
yeah,
Uh, One of the things that helps is that when clients come to us, there's always a business analysis into what goes on because you're doing a preliminary underwriting before the full underwriting happens. And so in this business analysis, then you can now see, okay, what do your margins look like? What do your operating margins look like? If you're looking to sell, what's the
yeah,
multiple on that operating profit or operating margin for sell if that's in that space, or if you're looking to purchase, it's the same way. And so because of those things, there are some tax implications or tax structures or tax benefits that we can now add on top of that. I'm not a
yeah,
tax accountant, I'm not a tax expert, I only know a little bit to just kind of say, okay, well, maybe there's something you can do, and we can bring somebody in here who can
yeah.
act, you know, who
It's
actually does this and
yeah,
really
it's
understands the
looking
nuts
for
and
that like, okay, there's a
bolts.
conversation to be had
Exactly.
here with somebody who knows this,
Yeah.
versus like there's
Exactly.
no conversation to be had here.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Right. I mean, there's a the VAT tax where it's a receivable on the balance sheet that is delayed. Well, it's a liability, but then it becomes a receivable at some point.
Yeah,
When it gets really, really, really complicated like that,
yeah,
you bring in the experts. But some of those things that we can see, right? Um, and so in this space, because you're doing that, or you should be doing that to help your clients if you're looking for
yeah,
the larger deals. It naturally filters into what you're doing,
yeah,
and how you're generating and profiting from the deals that you close.
yeah. Um, have you seen or gotten involved with anyone who's doing like Section 8 housing and looking at like alternate forms of revenue? I'm seeing more, and this is on smaller deals. I'm seeing a lot
Hmm.
of investors start to look at that as a way of making sure that cash flow is consistent,
Hmm.
making sure that there's stability inside of their rentals, and that I
Yep.
feel like is a response to the eviction
Hmm.
process in New York State
Sure.
specifically.
Sure.
Do you see the same thing in your areas?
I haven't had any of those deals. I
Hmm.
have seen a couple of, or I've heard of, people that are doing those type deals. We've got things that come across our area where, they're in a depressed or economically challenged area,
Yeah,
but they come in and they take over and try to, reduce rents and, try to maximize, what they've put in it from that standpoint. Not necessarily Section 8. There's different rules for Section 8. Obviously, the government
yeah,
is involved with some subsidiaries that happen in that space. So I haven't been specifically involved in those, so
hmm,
I can't really speak to it in detail. But yeah, I mean, there are investors that go that route. They're successful in that route, and anytime you're creating residual income in that space in whatever area that you're doing is a model. Again, it's all based on risk threshold. So
yeah,
that goes into it as well. So
yeah. What I was seeing is cash sensitive investors liked the that because there's stability in pay.
okay, yeah, yeah.
Um, One of the things I was noticing is that you have insurance products that can do the same thing
Hmm.
when you get up into the higher end of the scale.
Hmm.
So there's rental insurance on a building by building basis and things like that.
Interesting.
And so it's there's always insurance for something, right? Somebody will sell something on something.
Absolutely,
Like
absolutely. Insurance companies,
yeah,
these guys do well.
yeah,
Let's put it that way. They do well.
yeah. I when people are looking at taking rental loans early on in their
Mhm.
career, I recommend trying to see if there's something like that you can
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's
Yeah,
good. I'll have to put that in my repertoire as well, for sure.
yeah. Um, I just know that in the pandemic, a lot of investors lost their properties because
Yes.
they couldn't keep up with payments, and a lot of that was a result of just non-payment and no
Yes.
eviction process.
Yes.
Um,
Well, a lot of that during that time was, a lot of investors were over leveraged.
yeah,
Um, and so it was really, cash was tied into, assets. Uh,
yeah,
and you're in an environment at that point where you can't move those assets. And so, then you've got to just start liquidating, and or you just lose the property altogether. And so, there was some of that.
yeah,
But government stepped in with some programs through the SBA that kind of staved off a complete collapse or calamity. So
yeah,
those things did help. But unfortunately, there were some um, that got the short end of the stick during that process.
yeah. That was
Interesting.
interesting is the right word. Yeah, um, yeah. I think hopefully we never have to go through that again, and I
Fingers
don't think we're
crossed,
quite
man.
out of the woods, but
Fingers crossed.
um,
I mean,
just want to
we'll see
plague
what the
free
market's
of
doing.
the.
Yeah, we'll see. I think there's a correction right now.
Yeah,
In the market. The experts are saying we might be in a bear market space now. Who
yeah,
knows? And so hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully we're at the bottom, and
yeah.
we can
One
pick it back.
behavior pattern I noticed was that professional investors are not panicking.
Right.
Um, People that are amateurs are,
Yep.
um, and part of it is that they're not as numbers driven,
Right.
I guess, and so when they're looking at the coming recession, it's very scary
Sure.
versus someone who's just like, well, this is the template, this is what I have to do, and it has to fall within these bounds and scenarios,
Sure. Sure.
um, and it may mean you get tied around deals, but it doesn't mean you stop.
Correct. Correct. Well, it's the old adage: buy low, sell high,
Yeah,
right? And so when there's a
as
dip
long
like
as there's a
this,
spread.
exactly, as long as there's a spread, right?
Yeah,
Um, yeah, the guys that are in it and gals that are in it, are in it for the long haul. And you may see when there's a dip, particularly within commercial real estate or just regular real estate, that there may even born of an acquisition
yeah,
when there's a bottom out. Because again, in business and economics, it's cyclical, right?
yeah,
You have your peaks, you have your troughs. Um, you know, it tends to go like this, right, as it's
yeah,
going up. And so experts or people that have the experience understand that, um, and they just hold, and they don't panic. To your point, they just say, all right, well, we're just going to ride the wave, if you will, right, for lack of a better term,
yeah,
um, and not panic, and deploy more capital. So
yeah.
that's the difference.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be changes in home buying patterns. I mean, we're seeing that even like looking at our buying power. Um, we actually are in the process of buying a house,
Good, congratulations.
and as we were buying the house, we put an offer in and did the inspection, and then it came
Yeah,
back with a lot of issues, and
sure,
so we revised our offer, um,
of course.
and it sat for 2 months, and in the time it sat, our
Yeah,
monthly payment went up $300 a month because of the
sure.
interest
Yeah,
changes.
cost of capital is
Um,
going up.
yep, and so we revised our offer again.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
that's just how it goes.
yeah, yeah,
And and that's I think how it works. You still have to look at the numbers
yeah,
and do the
yeah,
numbers make sense?
yeah.
Um, but it's still there. The opportunities are still there.
They're still
What
there.
we were seeing was that no one was putting offers in on the house.
Hmm.
So our offer was able to stand for a long time because we valued the house properly.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
and the real estate agents were fairly new and they did not.
Ah,
And so they had some unrealistic expectations and the market didn't bear it out.
okay.
Um, and that's a good lesson too on the investor side is that
Yeah,
there's like, well, the market's raising, I'll be able to get X, and
right.
that's not always true.
Sure,
And
sure.
like you said, it comes down to price per square foot.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Exactly.
what we did, like we looked at the price per square foot, we looked at the renovation costs
Yep.
and came up with the right number. And then you're looking at all of these other houses that are selling for X amount more, but their square
Yep.
footages are different.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, it's all numbers.
Yeah, it's all numbers. It's all due diligence to get what you want, what you need.
Yeah,
You want to make sure that for rehab, right? In this case, it would have been a rehab, right? I
yeah,
mean, you're very um, you understand how the process works. Uh,
yeah,
Sometimes you just don't want to throw money at it because you have to understand what the after repair value is going to be, right? You want
right.
to understand what that is, so you're making sure that you're maximizing whatever equity that you can get,
Yeah.
especially if you want to turn it around. So
And that's exactly what happened here is we ran the numbers on the construction and we looked at where that, like
yeah.
it's gonna be at 100% of the ARV.
Oh
So
wow.
it's like, you can't do that. You
Right,
can't do
right.
that.
That
And
would make
yeah,
sense. That
um,
would make sense.
that's the other side of the market I think that's interesting and something that you're probably seeing from your side is that the renovations, the rehab, it's taking longer, it's
Yeah,
costing more.
correct.
Um, and so what I've seen is that professional crews,
Hmm.
they're kind of fine
Hmm.
because they know exactly who's doing the labor, they know what the costs are. But there's this need to feed the machine
Yeah,
because they can't lose that team or else the entire business goes away.
correct.
Um, and then people just starting out, it's really hard to find
Yeah,
people.
that's
Um,
correct.
yeah,
That's correct. It's the old adage: you get what you pay for.
yeah,
Because even within that space, you can have a crew, and they've been working together. But there's just so much work out there that maybe your assistant at some point decides to start his own crew.
yeah,
And so now, because the main crew that you wanted or that you've been working with for all of your deals, all of a sudden now somebody's opened up and he's new. Or you have somebody that you're starting out in the fix and flip market. You're new. Um, you
yeah,
can't get the normal contractors to do what you're doing. So now you've got a new contractor. So everybody's new.
yeah,
And so you've got delays and costs. You've got
yeah,
mistakes everywhere because that learning curve is happening on both sides.
yeah,
And so that's a challenge too. That's a challenge too. It's also a challenge from the debt raising side, right? There's a lot of it's lending institutions that want you to have a couple of deals under your belt
yeah.
before you can really even get anything from them, and so that's a challenge too. Um,
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing that with one client, and
yeah, yeah,
and it's an interesting process.
yeah, absolutely.
And what I've found with lenders is 3 to 5 deals,
Yeah,
and you kick into a different tier, and it's
exactly.
3 to 5 recent deals too, because
Yeah, yeah. It's got to be relevant.
yeah, worked with a couple people that they'd held properties for 20 years. They're starting
Mhm.
over when they go to buy.
Yeah, exactly,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's
Gotta keep
interesting.
it keep it learning.
Yeah, each deal it has its own life. It's no one deal is the same as the next,
Yeah,
and even if it's the same individual, the deal is different from deal to deal, um, and so that those things make it interesting. You can have somebody just a slam shut deal, and you go on. And you can take that same individual, and the next deal is like, well, there's no way. Like, well, it's the same guy. Uh, so see some of
yeah,
those too.
yeah, yeah. It's fun and interesting, and it's a good time. I feel like to be in this too.
Yeah,
Um, there's that whole like you want something to think about and deal with. I think
yeah,
is
yeah,
if you're in that space, it's keeps your mind active.
for sure.
Um, so yeah, it's now. Uh, Now's a good time.
Yeah,
Now's a great time to take money on.
yeah,
Rates are going up, but
correct,
if you're living in your means, it works.
correct.
Any advice? So you kind of have different hats. Any advice on the equipment side? Any advice on the commercial side? Like,
Yeah.
what would you leave people with?
People think that whatever they want to do is just too big and beyond them. And that's really not the case. You would be surprised how simple it is. And I don't mean that the actual task is simple, because there are
Hmm.
challenges within the task. But you'd be surprised how simple it is to actually just, put the idea on paper, and speak to somebody like myself or you, to get that rolling, whether it's equipment financing, whether it's commercial financing, whether you partner up with some people and just say, hey, listen, you know what, I think we could do this.
Yeah.
Um, and most people, they look at these, these big time corporations, and they're like, well, these, I don't know how these guys did it. Well, Jeff Bezos said it best once. He said, all big things start off small, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's what I would say. I would say, try it, call, you know, go out and do it. People are doing it. People are realizing that, hey, listen, I actually can do this. I was actually in one of those seats too. I was sitting in an office, and made the investment that I was actually going to do it. Same thing with yourself, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Had the formal education, and undergraduate degree, MBA, and they're like, I'm just going to climb this corporate ladder, and you realize that, listen, I think want something a little bit more, and
Yeah.
I would say just go out and do it. That
Yeah.
would be my advice.
I so I went into entrepreneurship in '08,
Right?
and one of the things that helped us make the decision. So I was the only one who left the job. Everyone else stayed at the corporate job, but I like left and took the full leap.
Yep.
And what made our decision for us was that there were vacant properties,
Hmm.
and I'm pretty good at talking with people, so
Yeah.
we managed to talk our way into free space
Yeah.
in the middle of a downturn.
Yeah.
And that was uh, the first company I started was a art gallery.
Very nice.
So we started with we had two different galleries for free. We
Nice.
actually got paid to have the
Nice.
galleries,
Very, very
um,
nice.
and so yeah, it's just like you have an idea, you have a conversation, you keep that
Yeah.
conversation going, and
You
stuff
get it
changes.
going, and
Yeah,
that's it. And that's it. And then, then you've got the next tier, right? So you get a few people that actually do it, and then you go to the bank, and then what is the bank going to say? No,
right.
right? And so a lot of people think, okay, well, that's the end of it.
Yeah,
It's actually really not. It's really the beginning. Banks have certain criteria within their underwriting guidelines, where they just can do and they just can't do. And so,
right.
there are tons of deals. Most of our deals are done that banks can't do, or that banks have denied.
Yeah,
Um, and so, when you come to people like us who can actually get the deals done for you, a lot of people just don't know that
yeah,
there's alternative lending out there, with competitive rates,
yeah.
that can compete with banks.
I've
So,
got to say that when I started, I guess like training would be the word,
yeah.
to do this, to help broker loans for people. It
Hmm.
took me a hot minute to wrap my head around the concept.
Sure. Yeah.
And then it took me having a couple clients and making calls and realizing that um, it it makes sense that there are people doing this, because
Sure.
if you look around you, most of the world wasn't built from a bank,
Right.
and um, you had to almost get to a level of success before that even became an option.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you're not
Exactly.
going to save your way into that.
It's not possible. Well,
So
I can't say it's not possible, but it's,
yeah, it's not how it's usually done.
correct. Correct. Mhm.
There's something I call entrepreneur's credit,
Mhm.
which is in the venture industry, which is like you just max everything out and
Yeah.
you're in a horrible financial state, and then your business hits, and then everyone wants to work with you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Got a
it's
friend who
not
did that. Did
not
that.
the same in real estate, where I think like you don't want to do that. You
Right.
know, it
Right.
definitely
Right.
makes
Right.
that hill harder to climb.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's the same. It's kind of the same idea where you start getting the deals. People want the deals.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
and to your point about get the numbers right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, again, that's, you won't know everything. And so when you come and you speak to somebody like myself or you, that's where we help foster that type of, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is what I've got. I've had a number of consultation meetings, right? That nothing really comes for out of that. It's just,
mhm.
okay, well, you got to get your ducks in a row from this standpoint and that standpoint, and then come back and we can do something, 5, 6, 7 months, a year from now.
Yeah.
Um, just that guidance. And sometimes that can be just overwhelming, and somebody's just like, you know what, I'm just going to go back to to work. It's just easier that way, it's because
Yeah.
but there are solutions. There are things out there. There are programs out there. There are companies like ours that can help facilitate that.
Yeah. Well, we're pretty much at the end of time. And so on the note that you just said, I'd love to have you tell people how they can get in touch with your company.
Awesome. So I'm the managing director, president with Pius Capital Group. You can visit us at www.piuscapitalgroup.com. We are also on LinkedIn and Facebook. So that is Pius, Pius, capitalgroup.com. So I was very happy to be here, Rob.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. And
Absolutely.
it was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well,
Alrighty.
talk to
Have a
y'all
good one.
later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye bye.